The phone vibrated against the cold stainless steel table, the sound sharp and out of place in the low, cozy hum of a downtown Portsmouth coffee shop. I had just finished a 24-hour duty shift. My body was exhausted, but my mind was still wired, still scanning for threats. I was staring at a photograph tucked inside my wallet. My grandmother, Meline, the woman who raised me, the woman I trusted my parents to protect. Because family is supposed to be the safest harbour there is, an hour earlier, my mother had texted, "Me, Grandma is sleeping. Honey, we're having a lovely dinner." Attached was a photo of a glass of expensive red wine, perfectly framed like a lifestyle ad. Now an unknown number lit up my screen. I answered. "Are you related to an elderly woman in a beige sweater?" A man asked, his voice tight with urgency. I found her shivering on a stone bench at the abandoned park off Highway 17. She said her son left her here, something inside my chest. Split clean open. Had my parents really abandoned their own mother on a freezing winter night, just so they could go to a party? The smell of roasted coffee, something that usually grounded me, turned bitter in my mouth. I was 28 years old, a U.S. Army captain, a logistics officer trained to manage chaos under pressure. And yet nothing had prepared me for a betrayal this complete. Outside, the Virginia winter pressed in, damp and salty, the kind of cold that crawls straight into your bones. I looked down at the technical manuals spread across my table, symbols of order, systems, rules that made sense. 2 weeks ago, I had wired 70% of my paycheck home. I thought it was for heating bills, for supplements, for comfort, for dignity. I believed my parents, Douglas and Cora, still understood decency. I was wrong. The calm I had felt was nothing more than the surface of a lake seconds before a torpedo tears through it. Highway 17, I whispered into the phone, my voice rough, heavy. The man confirmed the location, desolate, miles from anything resembling safety. "She's freezing," he said. "Captain, I'm a veteran too." I recognized that look in her eyes. It's the look of someone who's been left behind. The world around me went silent. The clink of mugs, the hiss of the espresso machine, laughter. All of it drained away. My grandmother, the woman who taught me how to bake apple pies, who taught me that honor mattered more than comfort, was being treated like discarded cargo. I hung up and immediately dialed my father. The line rang 3 times before his smooth, rehearsed voice answered. "Livia, sweetheart, why are you calling so late?" "I'm in the middle of a tux fitting. We've got that yacht club gala tomorrow." Crystal glasses clinked in the background. Soft jazz, celebration. "Where is Meline?" I asked. No greeting, no softness, just command. There was a pause, barely a second, but I heard it. "The crack in the armor. She's sleeping," he said smoothly. "The sedatives have made her difficult lately. Cora thought it best not to disturb her." Why all the sudden concern? The lie slid out easily, too easily. I could almost smell his expensive cologne through the phone, sharp and artificial. I imagined him surrounded by mirrors and designer labels while his mother sat freezing under a flickering street lamp. This wasn't neglect, it was desecration. I remembered the verse Meline used to read to me as a child about caring for your own, about how abandoning them meant abandoning your faith. My father hadn't just forgotten that lesson. He'd sold it. "Don't disturb her," I repeated, calmly, dangerously. "I understand." I didn't yell. Officers don't yell when a mission becomes a rescue. I hung up. My hands were locked so tightly around my phone that my knuckles had gone white. The surge through my spine wasn't fear. It was resolve. Cold, absolute. Everything I thought I knew collapsed in that moment. Every holiday, every "we love you," every dollar sent home. It had all been theater. I stood up, left my coffee untouched, grabbed my keys, and walked into The wind, the Ford F-150 roared to life like it understood the assignment. As I pulled onto the road, there was only one objective left in the world: retrieve my grandmother. Highway 17 disappeared beneath my headlights, swallowed by fog. The V8 engine growled, grounding me as my thoughts threatened to spiral. My training took over. Time, distance, intent, 24 minutes from my parents' house to that park. They had passed lit gas stations, open diners, places full of people. This wasn't an accident. It was a disposal. They hadn't just left her, they had sentenced her. The fog wrapped around the trees like a burial shroud as I pulled into the gravel lot. One street lamp flickered in the wind, and there she was. Meline sat hunched on a rusted iron bench, her body trembling. Beside her stood the man who had called me, shielding her with his own coat, a veteran. I knew it by the way he stood. Still, watchful, I killed the engine and stepped out. My boots struck the pavement hard. The flashlight beam landed on her face, and my heart broke all over again. The woman who had been my anchor was soaked through, her beige sweater heavy with cold. Her eyes once sharp and kind were glazed, unfocused. Tears clung to her cheeks, frozen mid-fall. A canvas bag sat at her feet, stuffed with old journals and memories she hadn't been allowed to keep warm. I dropped to my knees in front of her. "It's me," I said softly. "I've got you." Her eyes flickered. Recognition struggled through the fog. And in that moment, as I wrapped her in my coat and lifted her carefully into my arms, I knew something with absolute clarity. Family isn't proven by blood. It's proven by who shows up when the night is cold. And that night, only one of us did. Trinkets, her entire life reduced to a single bag, discarded like trash meant for a landfill. "Livia," she whispered. Her voice was barely there, a fragile thread struggling against the howling wind. I dropped to my knees in front of her, the cold, wet ground seeping through my uniform. I didn't care. None of it mattered anymore. The world had narrowed to the violent trembling in her hands, to the way she couldn't even grip the straps of her own bag. "I'm here, Grandma," I said softly. "I'm right here." The words cracked something open inside me. Years of discipline strained to keep my voice steady, to stop it from splintering into grief right there on the ground. She leaned closer, her breath carrying the faint medicinal scent of the oil she used on her aching joints. Her lips trembled. They said I was a parasite, Livia. The word landed like a punch to my chest. "Cora told me your soldier's salary wasn't enough to pay for the burden of keeping me," she rasped. She said she couldn't stand the smell of an old woman's medicine in her designer hallways anymore. Said I was rotting the air of her perfect life. Parasite, burden. My mother had taken 70% of my paycheck every month and turned it into social currency, luxury dinners, appearances, a polished illusion of success while grinding my grandmother's dignity into the floor. They hadn't just mistreated her. They had weaponized my sacrifice, used my loyalty as justification for cruelty. And when she no longer served their image, they disposed of her. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was precise, calculated, absolute. I rose slowly to my feet, the fury inside me no longer wild. It hardened, focused, cold. From the backseat of my truck, I pulled out my dress blues. The dark wool was heavy in my hands, the weight of oath and honor stitched into every seam. Without a word, I draped the jacket over her shoulders. Gold buttons, sharp stripes, military order wrapped around a woman they had tried to erase. "Don't say another word, Grandma," I said, my voice low and steady. "Their mission is over. They deserted their post. Mine starts now." I didn't let her take another step in that place. I lifted her into my arms, startled by how light she felt, like a bird with broken wings, fragile, hollow. Inside the truck, the heater roared to life. I locked the doors. The click echoed like a chambered round, the stranger, the veteran who had guarded her gave me a silent nod. Duty recognizing duty. As I pulled away, I didn't look back. My parents thought they were free. Thought they could return to their yacht club parties and hollow prestige without consequence. They were wrong. I wasn't taking her back to that house of lies. That home was dead. The war had simply moved to a new front. The silence in my Portsmouth apartment was suffocating, broken only by the thin, fragile sound of my grandmother breathing as she slept in the guest room. Dawn crept over the Virginia coastline, pale and indifferent. I felt nothing. My laptop glowed on the counter. On the screen, my mother's Facebook profile smiled back at me, curated bliss, polished to perfection. A photo of a sunlit patio. Silver trays, croissants, porcelain cups. Caption: a peaceful morning knowing Grandma has been moved to the best resort for her golden years. Family is everything. The resort was a rusted bench on Highway 17. The lie wasn't just audacious. It was pathological. For 10 years, I had financed this illusion. Every deployment, every overtime shift, 70% of my salary poured into a performance I thought was love. I hadn't been protecting my family. I'd been paying for the shovel they used to bury her. I opened the window, the cold air sharpening my resolve. It was time to document the truth. I hit record. The phone rang twice. "Livia, darling," my father said smoothly. "You're up early." "I was thinking about Grandma," I replied calmly. "I wanted to send extra funds for her care." He chuckled. "No need. She's in a high-end private clinic. Very exclusive, no phones. She's probably enjoying a massage." The lie flowed effortlessly. Before he could continue, the phone changed hands. "Listen to me, Captain," my mother snapped. "Don't interrogate us like criminals. I just want to know where she is." "You're just a low-level soldier," she hissed, covered in mud. "You don't understand elite life. Keeping her was charity." Then the threat: "If you interfere, you'll never see her again." I didn't argue. I hung up. They thought they had power. They forgot one rule: never corner a soldier who has nothing left to lose. I opened a new folder on my drive. Their fortress of lies, and like every fortress, it had weaknesses. I scrolled through my contacts, past polished names and curated numbers, searching instead for the people who lived on the edges of my parents' perfect world, the ones they ignored, the ones they intimidated, the ones they assumed would stay silent forever. I wasn't just taking my grandmother away, I was coming for the only thing they valued more than money: their reputation. The reconnaissance phase was over. It was time for the ambush. The Sunset Diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of place where time stalled and secrets leaked between chipped mugs and cracked vinyl booths. This wasn't where power met. This was where truth slipped out when no one was watching. Rose sat across from me. She'd lived next door to my parents for over 20 years, but now she looked smaller, folded in on herself. Her hands shook around a silver fork, her eyes darting everywhere except my face. I wasn't in uniform, just jeans, a dark jacket, but rank doesn't disappear when you take it off. It settles into your posture, your silence, your eyes, and Rose felt it. "Rose," I said calmly, quietly, "I'm not here to chat." Her fork paused midair. "I know you were on your porch that night," I continued. "Tuesday, 11 p.m. I know you saw my father's Ford pull out of the driveway. And I know who was in the back seat." The diner went still. The grill hissed in the distance. Somewhere a trucker laughed, but at our table, time stopped. Rose stared down at her half-eaten hash browns. "Livia, please," she whispered. "Your father told us anyone who interfered would face a defamation lawsuit. He said he had friends on the council, lawyers ready to move." Her voice cracked. "I'm a widow. I can't afford to lose everything." Of course he had. Douglas Shields didn't raise his voice. He raised fear. Lawsuits were his favorite weapon. Clean, quiet, devastating. And what did Cora tell you? I asked, leaning forward just enough. Rose swallowed. She said Meline had lost her mind. Severe dementia, that she was hallucinating, hurting herself for attention. Cora told us not to believe anything she said, that she was dangerous. The words sliced deep. They weren't just abandoning her, they were erasing her. By branding her insane, they ensured no one would ever listen, no matter how loudly she cried. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was raw, unfiltered. My grandmother in a military hospital bed, eyes hollow, hands clutching. The beige sweater she'd been thrown out in, I slid it across the table. She was your friend for 20 years, I said softly. You shared recipes, went to church together, and you let them leave her on a park bench like trash. Rose's breath hitched, then her shoulders collapsed. The fork fell from her hand. Clattering against the plate like a gunshot, she begged. Rose sobbed. She held the car door. Cora shoved her away, told Douglas to drive before anyone saw. I watched from behind my curtains. I was so afraid. Each word hurt. But I needed them. There's more, I said. She nodded. Town Hall, this Saturday. Douglas is the keynote speaker. He's presenting on sustainable American families. He's using your grandmother as his success story, a luxury retirement. Transition, my blood went cold. I reached across the table and held her hand, not to threaten, but to steady. When I call your name, I said, I need you to stand up and tell the truth, for Meline. Rose nodded. The ambush had her. Time and place. That night, I entered my parents' house silently. The air smelled like vanilla candles and expensive lies. Family portraits lined the walls, smiling faces frozen in perfection. Predators in frames. I wasn't there as a daughter. I was on mission. Douglas's office was quiet. Leather, cigars, power. I sat in his chair and unlocked his computer. His password was his birthday. Men like him never imagine they'll be challenged. What I found made my stomach turn. Encrypted emails. A boutique law firm. Subject line stripped of emotion. Financial incapacity assessment. Asset liquidation strategy. They had been documenting her decline for months, building a legal cage. Planning to seize her pension, her savings, her dignity. Then I saw my name, Livia's contributions to be diverted immediately upon filing. For 10 years, I hadn't been helping my family. I'd been funding a crime. I closed the laptop. The war was no longer personal. It was righteous. And this time, they wouldn't see it coming. I had poured my heart and 70% of my officer's salary into that house, believing I was securing safety for my grandmother, stability, care, dignity. Instead, I had been financing the very lawyers drafting documents designed to erase her autonomy. I wasn't helping her survive. I was unknowingly funding her captivity. I was the silent investor in my own grandmother's imprisonment. I turned to the security system interface next. The Ring camera files sat neatly in a cloud folder labeled property maintenance. Even the lie had been organized. I scrubbed through the timeline until I found it Tuesday night, the cold one. The footage bloomed onto the screen in sharp, ghostly grayscale. The front door swung open. Douglas appeared first. His hands clamped around Meline's upper arms as he dragged her toward the SUV. She looked impossibly small beside him, her slippers scraping against the driveway as she struggled to keep up with his impatient, furious pace. Then Cora stepped into frame. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frantic. She was adjusting her silk scarf. I turned the volume up. Just get her in the car. Douglas, Cora snapped, her voice slicing clean through the wind. If the neighbors see her like this, it's social suicide. Take her to the park off 17. Nobody goes there this time of year. Meline trembled, her hands clawing desperately for the car door, her lips moving in a silent plea. Cora didn't move. "Go," she said coldly. "You senile old woman. You're ruining our reputation with that smell and your rambling. You're lucky we're not dumping you at a shelter." I felt my breath seize. Watching my grandmother clutch that door like it was the last solid thing in her world did something to me that combat never had. My heart vibrated against my ribs, a pressure so intense it bordered on rupture. And then I found the final folder. Project Haven. It wasn't a clinic. It wasn't a resort. It was a real estate development proposal. My grandmother owned coastal land, Chamberlain land held by her family for generations, quietly rezoned, quietly appraised, quietly transformed on paper into a multi-million-dollar luxury resort. They weren't discarding her out of inconvenience. They were removing her as an obstacle. This wasn't neglect, it was a purge. A war of greed where the casualty was their own. "Mother," I leaned back in the chair, my eyes burning, not with tears but with clarity. Something cold and hollow settled inside me. My parents ceased to be human in that moment. They became monsters dressed in tailored suits and polished smiles. As I stood to leave, my hand brushed a small wooden door tucked into the corner of the office, the linen closet. Inside, buried beneath dust and disuse, hung a garment bag. I unzipped it. My grandfather Harold's army uniform. The brass buttons were dulled with age, but my patches still held their shape. I ran my fingers over the coarse wool and heard his voice, steady and unyielding. "Protect those who can't protect themselves." I copied everything. Emails, videos, legal drafts, every lie, every plan. I wiped my footprint clean and stepped back. Into the hallway, the family portrait stared down at me, frozen smiles gleaming under soft lighting. They wanted to protect their reputation. Fine. I would give them one they'd never escape. Portsmouth Town Hall rose like a cathedral of conscience, white marble, polished mahogany, and echoes meant to amplify power. That night, the air buzzed with perfume, polish, and the quiet confidence of 400 influential citizens. At the podium stood Douglas Shields, charcoal Italian suit, perfect posture. "The face of virtue, integrity," he proclaimed, smiling warmly, "is the bedrock of our neighborhood. Responsibility to our elders is not just a duty, it is the soul of the American home." The lie tasted poisonous. I stood at the back as the oak door settled behind me. I wasn't the daughter they expected. I was in dress blues. Dark wool, razor-sharp creases, silver bars catching the light. Every step forward rang out metal against hardwood, each click of my heels beating like a war drum. Beside me, Meline walked tall. Her hand rested lightly on my arm. Her eyes were clear, steady, unbroken. The room fell silent. Douglas froze mid-gesture. His confidence collapsed into something pale and terrified. In the front row, Cora gasped, her fingers tightening around her designer clutch. I didn't wait. I marched down the aisle, stepped onto the stage, and handed my encrypted drive to the AV technician. "My name is Captain Livia Shields," I said, my voice calm and lethal. "I'm not here to discuss abstract integrity. I'm here to show you what's been hiding behind it." I pressed play. Cora's voice filled the hall. "Just get her in the car." "Douglas, if the neighbors see her like this, it's social suicide. Go to the park off 17. Then the video. 400 people watched as my father dragged my grandmother toward the SUV, watched her plead, watched Cora stand with crossed arms, indifferent, stay there. Douglas's recorded voice echoed, "You old burden." The gasp was collective, heavy, furious. These were people who had shared pews with her, bought her pies, known her kindness. Cora screamed and lunged forward. "You're a demon, Livia, a traitor, destroying us for a useless, senile parasite." I didn't blink. "She is not a parasite," I said. "She is the woman who gave life to the man you married. The woman who raised me while you chased status. You didn't abandon her. You tried to erase her. Douglas shrank beneath the banner behind him. Then a voice rose from the crowd. Rose stood Dot, and the truth followed. Rose's voice cracked the dam. I saw them, she said, standing now, no place left to hide. I saw everything from my window, and I was too afraid to speak. Douglas threatened to sue me into the streets. They're monsters. That was all it took, one chair. Scraped back, then another. Then another. Neighbours rose to their feet like witnesses finally released from silence. Voices overlapped. Accusations collided. Truth poured out faster than anyone could contain it. Shame. Someone shouted from the balcony. Dot, and then the word. Caught fire. Shame, shame, shame. It rolled through the hall in waves, pounding against the walls, shaking the very air. My parents shrank beneath it. Not powerful, not elite. Just two hollow figures exposed under unforgiving light, stripped of the illusion they'd worn like armor. The mission was complete, the ambush flawless, but standing there, watching the ruins of my family's smoke and collapse, I felt no victory. Only a deep, aching grief for the honor they had sold so cheaply. I took Meline's hand. Together, we turned our backs on the noise and walked out, leaving the echoes of judgment behind us. The drive back was silent, not the peaceful kind. The kind that presses in on your chest, heavier than any rucksack, more exhausting than any march. When we reached my small safe house apartment, the lock clicked shut behind us, sharp and final. Meline lowered herself into the armchair by the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall soft, crystalline flakes drifting through the amber glow of street lamps. I set my cap on the table. My shoulders finally sagged. 48 hours of tension released all at once. The truth was out, and yet, standing there in the dim kitchen light, I didn't feel like a victor. I felt hollow. Like something essential had been burned out of me. I filled the kettle. The blue flame flickered beneath it, the only colour in the room. Meline stared at the snow, hands trembling with a fine, persistent shiver. This was the cost of truth. It frees you, but it leaves you standing among the shattered remains of what you thought was solid. I handed her a mug of chamomile tea. We didn't speak. There were no words capable of surviving the weight of what had been revealed. By 10 that night, the world had caught up. The Shield scandal tore through Portsmouth with the speed of a detonation. Messages flooded my phone, headlines multiplied. Photos of yacht club breakfasts and curated perfection became evidence exhibits of hypocrisy. Douglas and Cora were finished, not arrested, not jailed. Something worse. They were marked. Public shame followed them everywhere, down grocery aisles, through quiet streets, into every room where their names were spoken. A prison without bars. I stared at a frozen image of my father's face on the screen, pale, frightened, exposed, and for a moment, grief pierced me again. Not for who they were, but for who I had once believed them to be. I stepped onto the balcony. Cold air snapped against my skin. Snow swirled under a sky thick with clouds and memory. I remembered being 5, sitting on my father's shoulders at a Christmas market. My mother humming me to sleep. I searched those memories, trying to find the moment greed had begun its slow rot. Why had money been worth more than blood? The question echoed unanswered. When nothing is left, you learn what still holds you up. I went back inside and stood before my dress blues. The gold buttons caught the light, a reminder of oath, of boundaries, of knowing when ground is lost and when it's time to move. Meline slept lightly in the chair. I made a decision. We weren't going to hide, but we weren't staying here either. This place was soaked in ash. I packed a small bag, quietly. Precisely the way soldiers do when they No, the front has shifted. Morning arrived softer than expected. Meline sat at the breakfast nook, a wooden box in front of her, old cedar. Worn smooth by time, she slid it toward me. Your grandfather, she said softly, strength returning to her voice, knew where real value hides. Inside were deeds, plans, reports. 50 acres of land dismissed for years as worthless scrub. Recently rezoned, quietly appraised. $3 million. I sat stunned, the paper heavier than any weapon I'd carried. All the cruelty, all the contempt, all of it suddenly looked small, absurd. They had thrown away a fortune because they couldn't see past their own reflection. By the next afternoon, the phone rang again. Apologies. Tears, panic. They wanted back-in. They wanted forgiveness. They wanted access. I looked at my grandmother, steady now, dignified, unbroken, and I knew some doors don't close quietly, they close forever. I saw them, every second of it, from my window, frozen in place, too afraid to speak, too afraid to interrupt the truth as it finally clawed its way into the light. Douglas tried to silence me with threats, promising lawsuits that would leave me with nothing. He called us monsters, but then something unexpected happened. One by one, the neighbors stood, voices rose, anger spread like fire through drywood. Someone shouted shame from the balcony, and the word court echoed, multiplied until it wasn't just a word anymore. It was a verdict. The walls seemed to vibrate under its weight. My parents shrank before my eyes, not physically, but spiritually, to people exposed under a spotlight they could no longer escape. The mission was complete. The ambush had worked. The truth was out, and yet there was no triumph, only a deep, aching hollowness. The kind you feel when you realize someone sold their honor for a handful of silver and called it success. I took my grandmother Meline's hand, and together we walked out of the town hall, leaving the roar of judgment behind us. The drive home was silent, not peaceful silence, heavy, pressurized, the kind that drains you more than any battlefield ever could. Back in my small apartment, the cold air felt stale, untouched. The deadbolt snapped shut like a gunshot. Meline lowered herself into the armchair by the window as snow began to fall outside, soft and crystalline under the streetlights. I removed my military cover, set it on the table, and felt my shoulders finally collapse after 2 days of unbroken tension. The mission was over, but victory felt empty. As I filled the kettle, the blue flame flickered, the only color in the room. Meline stared at the snow, her hands trembling. This was the real price of truth. It frees you, yes, but it leaves you standing alone among the wreckage of everything you once trusted. We didn't speak. There were no words left for the grief of watching your own parents be consumed by the greed they had nurtured. By nightfall, the world finished what I had started. The scandal exploded across Portsmouth, phones buzzed, messages poured in online. The perfect image my mother had curated for years collapsed under the weight of public outrage. Their glossy photos became evidence. Their reputation evaporated. I saw my father's face frozen on my screen, pale, terrified, and for a moment, grief stabbed deep, not for who they were now, but for who I once believed they were. I stepped onto the balcony, letting the cold cut through me. Snow blurred the stars. Memories surfaced, being lifted onto my father's shoulders as a child, my mother humming me to sleep. I searched those memories for the moment everything went wrong. Why had money become worth more than their own mother? That night, with everything burned to the ground, I understood something simple and terrifying. When all else is gone, you learn what truly sustains you. Standing before my dress blues, I realized I couldn't fix them. But soldiers don't stay in compromised positions. We relocate. We find higher ground. And that's when I decided we would move forward. Morning came softer. Meline sat at the table with a small cedar box, worn smooth by time. Inside were land deeds. 50 acres my grandfather had bought quietly, dismissed by everyone else as worthless. It was now worth $3 million. The irony was devastating. My parents had thrown away a fortune without ever noticing it. When they found out, the apologies came fast. Their remorse smelled like money, not regret. They showed up at my door. Desperate, I didn't open it. Meline took my hand and reminded me, forgiveness is not letting someone back in. It's laying down the weight they left on your shoulders. And so we did. In a glass-walled office downtown, Meline signed the trust papers, transferring everything to me. My father watched from behind the glass, not mourning his mother, but the fortune he'd lost. That was the end. 6 months later, sunlight spilled across the porch of our new home. The air tasted like freedom. Meline laughed again, real laughter, not survival, but peace. I built something new, a company grounded in loyalty and integrity, a second mission, born not from anger, but purpose. One day, I saw my mother again, older, worn, pushing a cart of cheap groceries. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I felt no anger, only pity. That evening, Meline and I sat with old photos, sharing stories of strength and perseverance. She told me my real victory wasn't money or success, but finding my soul. In the middle of the storm, later, we cooked a simple dinner, the kind that tastes like home. My scars are still there, but they're no longer wounds. They're proof that truth survives, that honor endures, and that sometimes walking away is the bravest march of all. We built that firm to become a lifeline for people the world had quietly forgotten, for lonely seniors, for aging veterans, for souls who had been pushed into the shadows the same way my grandmother once had been. Left alone on a freezing park bench like she no longer mattered, I peeked through the curtain and saw Meline sitting in the front row. She wore a soft lavender dress, her silver hair perfectly set, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was smiling, not loudly, not proudly in a flashy way, but with a quiet, glowing pride that felt heavier than any medal I'd ever earned. That smile steadied me. I stepped onto the stage. My heels clicked against the polished wooden floor, each sound echoing like a heartbeat. When I reached the podium, the room fell silent. Hundreds of faces looked back at me. I adjusted the microphone and felt the full weight of every mile I'd marched to reach this moment. I told them the truth. I said I used to believe a soldier's only duty was to fight on distant battlefields. I thought honor was something you earned under fire in foreign lands. But I had learned the hardest battlefields are sometimes inside our own living rooms. Those front lines don't have bullets or bombs. They have lies, they have greed, they have betrayal, and those weapons can kill a human soul faster than any bullet ever could. I paused and scanned the crowd. I saw older men wiping their eyes, women nodding slowly, like they recognized the war one was describing. Many of them had survived it too. We're here today, I said, my voice growing steadier, stronger, to declare that no one gets left behind. We were here to make sure the people who built this country and raised our families were never treated like burdens, never discarded like yesterday's news. This fund isn't just about money. I told them it's about restoring dignity. And as the words left my mouth, something inside me finally loosened. I wasn't the abandoned daughter anymore. I wasn't the betrayed granddaughter. I was building something new from the wreckage. I thought about the stones that had been thrown at me, how I'd used them to build something better. Something kinder, something that would outlive all that pain. Then my eyes drifted to the back of the hall. Standing in the shadows by the heavy oak doors were two familiar figures. Douglas and Cora, they were dressed in their best remaining clothes, trying to look like they still belonged in this world of respect and grace. They watched the applause, the cameras, the handshakes, the standing ovation, but they didn't step inside. They couldn't. They were ghosts at a feast they no longer deserved to attend. In that moment, I felt no anger, only clarity. They weren't my enemies anymore. They were a lesson. Forgiving them had unlocked my freedom. Remembering them would protect my integrity forever. When the ceremony ended, I stepped down from the stage and took Meline's hand. We walked outside into the crisp Virginia afternoon, under tall pine trees whispering in the wind. We didn't talk about the freezing rain, or the park bench, or the cruelty. We talked about the future, about partnering with orphanages, about building bridges between the wisdom of the elderly and the energy of the young. I watched the pine trees sway and realized the scar in my heart had stopped aching. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was proof I survived. My story didn't end with revenge. It ended with continuation. I looked at my grandmother and saw peace in her eyes, and I knew finally that my mission was complete. We had held the line, we had guarded the truth, and we had left no one behind. True honor isn't a medal you wear, it's the standard you live by when no one is watching. My parents traded their souls for status. I found my purpose in the ruins they left behind, so here's the truth I'll leave you with. Never sacrifice your integrity for convenience. Never let greed blind you to the value of a human heart. Our elders aren't burdens, they are living history, and when we protect them, we protect the best parts of our humanity. That is the only legacy time can never tarnish.